With Sean Carroll, President and CEO of ANERA, which is an aid organization helping Palestinian refugees and other displaced communities in the region. He joins us live now from Los Angeles. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. All the attention right now has been on the negotiations, parliamentary, cabinet approvals and so forth, military activity in preparation for the upcoming exchange, if you like. Is there a similar build-up taking place among agencies like yours, the aid agencies, the humanitarian agencies? So help us visualize what's been going on the ground. I mean, there are trucks being loaded, trucks lined up, getting ready to I guess, make that surge into the Strip?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Arnold and Julie, for having me on. Absolutely, we're gearing up. And actually, it's important to recognize that a lot of aid has been sitting at the border for many months. ANERA has had 750 tons of rice sitting just outside the Gaza Strip, and it's been prevented from going in. So ANERA welcomes the announcement of this ceasefire agreement. I think just about everyone is overjoyed that we're finally at this point. You've seen some of the footage inside Gaza. Of course, there's no one more happy that this ceasefire is coming than Palestinians living in Gaza. But yes, we have to both get all of the aid that has been sitting at the border or already in the supply chain, having been bought in Jordan or in Egypt or in the West Bank and around the world, and get that moving and get it in. And we're hoping that we see a huge increase. There needs to be a huge increase in the short-lived ceasefire in January through early March. There were 700 trucks a day going in 6 days a week. We need to see that level or more. But yes, we're ready, and we'll gear up, and we'll work with partners. You heard from the humanitarian chief of the UN, Tom Fletcher. You heard from Secretary General Antonio Guterres. I second everything they said. We're ready. We have to be ready, but we have to be facilitated in this work to make sure that the red tape that sometimes hinders aid is lowered. All of the border crossings are open. There are enough hours. There's enough manpower to get all of this aid in.
Sean, help us with some perspective here, and I want to use the example of trucks. We are hearing that, up until yesterday, it was just a handful that were making it through into Gaza, every day. How many trucks are needed daily to begin, I suppose, addressing the hunger and medical needs of Gazans?
Let me say, after 2 years of counting trucks, we're sort of tired of counting trucks, because of course it's a much bigger issue. But to answer your question, I mean, before this war, there were 500-600 trucks a day going in order to catch up in January and February, in order to catch up a little bit with the insufficient amount of aid that had been going in. As I said, there were 700 trucks a day going in for 6 out of 7 days a week. And it's estimated that 500 or 600 trucks are needed in normal times. And of course, now we have huge amounts of the population who are hungry, who are starving, who are malnourished. The medical supplies, medicines and medical supplies are dwindling. And of course, we need a shelter, and we need more water coming in. We need to rebuild schools. So really what needs to happen here is the parties to this agreement, this ceasefire and this pathway towards peace, need to recognize that for this to work, there needs to be really unfettered access of everything that's needed for recovery and rebuilding. And of course, there need to be security checks. But far too often, the security checks are far too onerous. And we, as the deliverers of aid inside Gaza, need to make sure that aid goes to where it's supposed to go. And we do a very good job of that.
Yeah, you mentioned rebuilding, Sean. There are serious discussions about rebuilding Gaza, but with 90% of its infrastructure in ruins, we hear of hospitals flattened, the power grids down, water system destroyed. Where do you even begin to rebuild?
Yeah, it's enormous. And I went twice during the war. The last time I was there was last December, so it's been a while. And at the time, I said that if the war stops now, people will be dismayed and astonished at the level of destruction. But I also recognize that there was some infrastructure still standing, and Palestinians are resolute, they're resourceful. they were already rebuilding some things when I was there, even though the ceasefire hadn't come. And so, yes, the task is enormous, beyond comprehension, really. And now, of course, the proportion of buildings that are completely destroyed or too severely damaged to use is probably somewhere around 80 or 90%. We will see in the middle area in Deir al-Balah and some sections of Gaza City, there's some buildings standing, and people will rebuild and they will use what they have. But there needs to be massive amounts of support of financial aid, of expertise, of innovation, and it all, of course, has to begin with clearing rubble, and rubble that's strewn with unexploded munitions and toxic waste. And it's just an enormous task. But I think the world is ready. The world is ready to turn this around. There's huge welcoming of this ceasefire deal and a recognition that for there to be a better future for anyone in the region, we need to really lean in very hard on supporting Palestinian communities in their recovery and their reconstruction and their desires and their efforts to build a stable, prosperous life full of opportunities and livelihoods.
Sean, to your earlier point about security, we all remember how aid trucks were attacked, were looted. Gazans trying to collect aid themselves were targeted, allegedly by Israeli forces. I mean, how exactly are you making sure that security is going to be maintained and aid is actually getting to people safely and gets to where it's needed most?
Well, the biggest issue is having enough. When there isn't enough, when there wasn't nearly enough aid to meet the demand, then you had both desperation, individuals and families grabbing what they could, and you had war profiteering, and that breeds organized crime, and the social fabric, and particularly policing, had deteriorated. But when there's enough aid, that goes away quickly. The prices stabilize, so you don't have war profiteering, and there's enough access to both aid and commercial goods, so there isn't the desperation. Now, it'll take a little while, but if there's a sustained amount of sufficient aid coming in every day, I think we'll see that go away quickly. It is for a very, very long time, even as there wasn't really enough aid, people were not stealing it from one another. The social fabric held, and I think it can come back together. There's a lot of community supporting community, but the social fabric has been severely tested, if not actually torn asunder. And we've got to get that aid up so we get rid of that desperation and that war profiteering.
Okay, Sean, we will have to leave it there. I think it's safe to say all of us are, waiting for that expected surge in aid to begin and to go into Gazans who need it desperately. Sean Carroll is president and CEO of ANERA.